Today is January 22nd, 1998. We're with Mrs. Regina Weiss, maiden name Pinter. My name is Florence Schuster. We're in Kew Gardens, New York, USA. And this interview is being done in English. Today is January 22nd, 1998. We're with Mrs. Regina Weiss, maiden name Pinter, in Kew Gardens, New York, USA. My name is Florence Schuster. This interview is being conducted in English. Could you tell me your name, please?
Regina Weiss.
And what is your maiden name?
Pinter.
And could you spell it, please?
Pinter.
And your full name?
Weiss, Weiss.
Were you ever known by any other name?
No. Well, during the time that I was traveling, every country picked up a different G for the Regina. Like in Holland it was different, in Belgium it was different, in France it was different, and in Santo Domingo and Cuba it was different. It was Regina, Regine.
Where were you born?
Cologne, Germany.
And when were you born?
October 1st, 1929.
And how old does that make you now?
68.
What was your father's name?
Leo Pinter.
And your mother's name?
Helen Ressler.
Do you have any, or did you have any sisters and brothers?
I have one brother, 5 years younger.
And what is his name?
Dave.
Could you tell me a little bit about your father? What did he do for a living?
My father was a furniture and antique dealer in Germany and successful for his time. He was a real businessman. And my mother was a good Jewish housewife and a good mother.
What was your home life like?
I was born to a very loving family. For the first 4 or 5 years of my life was beautiful and normal. I had darling grandparents who loved me, came to see me every day, and was really a happy family until 1934-30.
Well, I want to stay back in your early childhood for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
What were your grandparents' names?
My grandparents' name was, my father's father was the Seide Moshe, and my mother's parents was Oma and Opa.
Do you know their real names?
Sure, Devorah Ziesel and Yitzhak Isaac. Who for all three of them I have children that are named after them.
Where were they from?
Poland. During First World War they came to Germany.
Do you know how that came about?
Well, First World War in Poland was a very bad situation. There was no food, there was no work. So they picked up and they looked for greener pastures. And they came to Germany, but they have more opportunities. My father was 4 years old when he came to Germany, and my mother was 11 years old. They went to school there, they went to gymnasium, they got married at a very early age.
Could you describe what your home looked like?
A real Jewish home. Lavish, crystal, silver, carpets, oriental carpets. My father, being an antique dealer, always loved to have beautiful things. Wanted to be surrounded. My mother cherished on everything that she had. She polished, she cleaned, she loved everything.
Did she do all the cleaning by herself?
No, she had help. She definitely had help in Germany. Everyday help.
Do you remember the help coming to the home?
Yes, I remember the help coming the first few years. We had Gentile help. And then later on, in later years, it was forbidden for Gentiles to work for Jews, and we had Jewish girls working for us who tried to make the hashara to go to Palestine. And that was one of the ways that we could get them.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
Well, since Gentile girls could not work anymore, we needed help. And these girls wanted to go to Palestine, or women, and they worked a certain amount in the fields, in the household, and got a certain amount of education from this. And when they finished, they got their permit to go to Palestine.
Who provided them with the permit?
There were always committees that did that.
I'd like to return to your home. What type of home was it? Was it an apartment? Was it a
It was a
house?
lavish apartment. It was always a big apartment.
Do
With
you,
big high ceilings, big high windows. That's what I remember.
was it in an apartment building?
In an apartment building.
And how many other Jewish families were in the building? And how many other families were in the building?
There were many other families in the building, and there were some Jewish families in the building. In the beginning of the first 4 or 5 years, we lived in a suburb. And then it became dangerous to live there. And we had to move to the old city. And then there were many, many, many more Jews living, one next to the other.
I'd like to describe what your early childhood was like in the suburbs. How many stories were there to this apartment?
Five floors.
Was there an elevator?
No,
What floor did you live on?
first floor.
How many rooms were in the apartment?
6 rooms, which was considered at the time a big house, big apartment.
What is your earliest memory?
My earliest memory is going to the park, looking, gathering pocketbooks from all the ladies. They all gave it to me. I love to walk around with pocketbooks, cut out dresses from magazines, because I always liked clothes, dolls, playing with my cousins. I had an aunt and uncle that had 7 children, so there was a lot of children in the house. I played a lot with them, and that's all I can remember from my earliest. My father taking me to shul every Shabbos, and the way my mother dressed me, everything matching. And I remember her standing by the window, watching out for us to walk until she couldn't see us anymore. My brother and I were always matched alike. She took a lot of interest in our looks and the way we presented ourselves. Eating habits were very important to them. Had to eat with forks, knives, had to eat proper at the table. Those are the things I remember.
You said you had cousins. Do you remember your aunts and uncles' names and their names?
Yes. I had my father's sister, her name was Tante Taube, and Uncle Avrom, and they had 7 children, out of which 4 survived and 3 perished in concentration camps. And we were together very, very often.
Could you tell me their names?
Sure, it was Ellie, Meilach, Reisel, Rivke, Miriam, Herschel, and Friede.
How far away did they live from you?
About 2 blocks.
Could you?
And my grandfather lived with them, but I must honestly say, he showed it very, very openly, my father's father, that he loved me more than any one of them. And he really showed it. And it created some jealousies, which I still feel to this very day. Even though we are old already, there was always, you were the Zaida's favorite.
Were you the oldest?
No, not at all. All the others were much older. In fact, I was among the younger ones. But he always gave me better Hanukkah presents. He showed me more love. He came to see me every day. Okay, he lived with them. He didn't had to go and see them, but he came to see me every day.
Do you know why that was?
My father was his youngest son who became an orphan at 14 years. And I guess my grandfather took care of him and covered him with love. And I was the child of his favorite son, so to speak.
I don't understand. You're saying that your father became an orphan?
At the age of 14.
So your grandfather
Yeah.
was his father?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you mean his mother died?
Yes.
Oh, so he became motherless.
He became motherless at the age of 14. And I was named after his wife, although there were other children which were named after his wife. He still had that favorite spot for me. And once my grandfather, who was sitting he was always learning the Talmud, and he was sitting at the table near the yard, and we were running out and out, in and out. And he kept on saying, it's drafty, don't do it, don't do it. Well, we were children, we were 6, 7 years old, and we were running out. And once he picked up his hand and he slapped. And as luck had it, it hit me. And my cousins jumped up and down. Der Seide hatte Rivke geschlagen, which means the Seide hit Rivke. He called me Rivke. And he jumped up and he couldn't stand it. He would jump up and hug me. Oi, I didn't know it was you, Rivke. I didn't know it was you. And he put his hand in his pocket and he took out money. Go buy yourself something sweet. Go buy yourself something chocolate. He apologized. But that's what I remember, how much I was loved by him.
What was your native language?
German. I spoke German because my father didn't want to speak Yiddish to us because he felt that my father was very much for education, that it's going to interfere with our school if we have Yiddish verses or Yiddish things. So he wanted us straight German to get a good education.
Could you describe the school that you went to?
I went to a Jewish Volksschule. I only made it to the 3rd grade.
What was it like going to school? Could you describe a typical day going to school?
Typical day was somebody walked me to school, either my father, my mother, or the girl walked me to school, and always somebody waited for me to pick me up from school. My father at the time drove a motorcycle, and I never forget the happiness. One day he picked me up on his motorcycle, and he drove me home. Those were the little things which are down memory lane. After school, we had a play group where we did our homework, and it was nice. I remember happy times in that school. Summertime, we went to day camp.
What was the age difference between you and your brother?
5 years.
And did you go to school with him also?
No, he was 5 and I was 9 when everything happened. He didn't go to school yet. He was 4 years old when we had to leave Germany.
Do you remember the birth of your brother?
Sure, very vividly.
Please tell me about it.
My brother was born October 24, 1934. I remember going to visit my mother. My father took me to visit my mother, and she had a doll in her bed, a big doll. And she said to me, "This is the doll that your little new brother brought to you." And I looked at it, and I said, "He's not very smart." And she asked, "Why?" And I said, "If he would have been smart, he would have brought me a bigger doll." Then I remember him coming home from the hospital, and life took a turn because we had to move. It was 1934. They were marching down the brown shirts and the big black boots, which set a fear in us. It took me years to overcome black boots, and even when black boots were in fashion, I did not wear them for a long time. And we went into, from there we went into the old city, which was a down. The apartment was not as nice, and the neighborhood was not as nice. But children adjust with other children. My aunt and uncle also moved. They were again close to us. And that's how life started there.
I'd like to still go back to the first house you lived in while you were younger. Um, could you describe how you sat at the table at dinner time? Like, perhaps could you tell us a typical Shabbos?
Typical Shabbos was always the white fresh tablecloth, which stood up by itself because it was starched by itself. The challah that my mother baked. Everything was clean and shiny. I think she worked the whole week for that Shabbos table. No different than we have it today because we took an example from her. But it's much easier to get everything. She had to bake the challahs, she had to kosher the meat. By that time we didn't have any more meat. We only had chicken, and that came hard later because they forbid kosher slaughtering in Germany. And we were able to get it from Holland or Belgium, a chicken a week, 2 chickens. At the table, there were always guests at the table, always outsiders.
How did you feel about having outsiders at the table?
We didn't know any different. There was always somebody who didn't have a home, who was passing through, who didn't have where to spend the Shabbos, that we invited to have.
Could you tell me what it was like when you went to shul?
Oh, it was nice to go to shul. We were dressed beautiful. We played with children outside. It was playful time. We didn't have to daven. We didn't have to sit inside. We were too young, and we were allowed to play outside. As long as we kept ourselves clean.
Did you have any relationship with any of the Gentiles in the neighborhood?
No. No, by that time they didn't have any relationships with us. Also remember my early years, I went to a Catholic kindergarten because that was the one in the neighborhood. At the time I was 4 or 5 years old. It was a Catholic kindergarten. I was exempt from prayer. And I could only eat their lunches because it was vegetables and bread. I couldn't stand their lunches. And once I refused to eat it, and they put me in the cellar. I refused to eat the salad. And they put me in the cellar. I still wouldn't eat it.
Why wouldn't you eat it?
Because it was not to my taste. It was awful. And years later, my mother made a salad. As many years later, she made a salad, and as I tasted it, I ran and spit it out, and I said, that is just like the nuns made it. And we found out they didn't put any salt into it. My mother had forgotten to put the salt in, but it brought back memories. That was the salad the nuns made. I hated that kindergarten.
Tell me about it. Describe what it was like.
Very regimented. Very regimented. We had to stand in line. We had to do this. It was not a free time. And the food. And they used to call me Jütchen. Jütchen means Jewish girl. And I knew it was a derogatory phrase because it wasn't very nice. And as soon as we moved, I was out of there, which I was very happy for.
Were there other Jewish children in the class?
Yes. Yes, but it made no difference. The children had a different look about them for the Jewish kids and for the other. So did the teachers and the nuns.
Could you give me an example?
It's not something that you can put your finger on. It was just the way you were treated. I guess if somebody else wouldn't want to eat, they wouldn't just throw them into the cellar. It was not a basement, it was a cellar. And it's the way you felt the current. There was an undercurrent.
What went through your mind when you were in the cellar? How long did you have to stay there?
Till the next period, which could have taken 45 minutes or longer. I don't know. But I endured it and I wouldn't give in. Even at one point, the cleaning woman came and said, "Should I throw it away for you?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to eat it." Not that I'm not a stubborn person, but I just refused to eat it.
Did they tell you you had to eat it?
Yeah, I have to finish it. I have to clean my plate.
And I need to clarify something here. You said a cleaning woman came by and offered to throw it away?
Yes.
And what was your response to that?
No. No.
What do you remember what you were thinking?
Well, if she gets caught, I'll be in trouble.
And when were you finally let out?
After the period, a certain period, they kept me and then they took me up. I guess it was time to go home.
What did you tell your parents?
Oh, that I don't remember. I only remember the incident, but I don't remember if I repeated it at home.
And this was in kindergarten?
That was in Catholic kindergarten.
How long did you stay in
In,
this school?
not very long. Maybe between 5 and 6 years.
Do you remember anything else about that school?
No, no. I guess things you don't want to remember, you don't remember. I remember being registered to the school when I was 6 years old. I remember getting my Zuckertüte.
Could you just explain that?
Every child got on the first day of school a big bag. It was made in like a horn, and it was filled with candy. And that was my Zuckertüte. And everybody tried to get a bigger one than the next one. And we took pictures that first day, and my mother came to pick me up, and it was really a nice beginning of school.
Did the teacher give you this?
No, 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 my parents gave me that. But every child's parents gave them a Zuckertüte.
Before school or after school?
In the middle of it.
How did that work?
During recess, all the parents came, and everybody got this Zuckertüte, and we took pictures, and that was the end. I remember my first grade teacher's name was Fräulein Braun. I could never imagine why she was still a Fräulein. She wasn't so young anymore.
What were your favorite subjects in school?
My favorite subject in school? I really don't remember. Because I didn't excel in anything, really. I loved reading. Really reading. Arithmetic I did not like. We didn't go very far because I only went to the third grade. How far could I have gotten? I learned how to read. I learned how to write. Basic arithmetic. The timetable. That was it.
Were you taught religion in school?
Yes, yes. It was definitely a religious school. We learned how to the Aleph base. We learned how to daven. But it was more history than religion.
After school, did you ever play with Gentile children?
Not in those days anymore, no.
Earlier, as a young child?
Earlier, when we were when I was 3, 4 years old, we played in the park with Gentiles and we jumped rope with them. We played. But after that, after I went to that school, no. Because we lived already, it was already 1935, and we lived already in a different neighborhood, and we never mingled with anybody.
Did your parents encourage you not to mingle?
No, it wasn't. It was not a question of encouraging. We were picked up, we were taken home, we were taken to the park, we were never left alone to be free.
Who picked you up?
My mother, my grandmother, it was during the day, so my father didn't come. But my mother was always involved with us. She took us to the park at weather permitting, but we did not mingle anymore. And they didn't mingle with us. The stores had their big Hakenkreuzes arm, and when I first learned how to read, my first thing was Juden und Hunde verboten. Oder keine Juden erlaubt. Which was signs on the cafes or on the stores that we passed by. Keine Juden erlaubt, Juden und Hunde verboten. We took it very much for granted that was the way it is. I didn't question it.
Do you remember any conversations that went on in your home?
Oh, yes. Did I? All I remember is my father and my mother talking. How can we get out of here? Where could we go? All borders are closed. That went on from 1935. I remember these conversations. All borders are closed. Where could we go? Should we try to go here? Should we try to go there? There was a thing that we could go to Brazil, but you had to have convert to go to Brazil. They accepted people to go to Brazil. Out of the question, Brazil. They even said that we could buy a conversion shine. My father said, out of the question. I mean, even to buy it, they should think that we are Catholics. Out of the question. We tried to get out. My father registered at the American consul, being that he was born in Poland and my mother was born in Poland. The quota was totally closed for us. He even tried to get a capitalist visum, which means if you have enough money, you can go on your own merits. So you can buy it. And we couldn't get it.
We're going to change tape.
Okay.
On July 22nd, 1998, we're with Mrs. Regina Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, I'd like to go back one more time to when you were very, very little. Do you have any memory of a very, very happy time, a family anniversary or a holiday?
My 6th or 7th birthday. My mother made me a birthday party. She invited the girls from my class. I remember that birthday party. How I should describe the birthday party? I can't describe. I only know that the kids came. We had a lot of sweets. And I got nice little presents. But that's all I remember.
Were all the girls Jewish?
Yes, they came from my class. Oh, we didn't mingle with Goyim. They wouldn't mingle with us, even if they lived in the same building. They didn't mingle. We didn't play with them. We kept to ourselves.
Do you remember a time when someone got sick in your family? What would they do? How would that be dealt with?
Oh, my mother was very, very, very quick to call the doctor. The doctor made house calls. We got sick like all children get sick. The doctor made house calls. We got our medicine. And we were kept in bed. The rooms were kept warm. Don't forget, it wasn't always central heating. By that time, we did not have any more central heating. And it had to be heated by an oven. She was very overpowering, very, very scared for our safety. Very, very scared. By the slightest sneeze or cough, the doctor was in the house.
Did you have a telephone?
Yes, we always had a telephone. I don't remember ever a time without a telephone. Didn't have who to call, but we had a telephone. I guess for business and so on.
Did you ever get a chance to observe your father at business?
Yeah.
Could you tell me about that?
He was smart and shrewd. And when he bought things, he was an old furniture and antique. When he bought things, he would mirror himself at the good buys he made and how much profit he could make out of it. He would sell it to dealers or privately. And at that, by the time I was 6, 7 years old, my mother helped my father in the business. And that's all I remember. I loved going into his store because it was surrounded with beautiful things. The mirrors, the paintings.
When did things begin to change?
When the real change came in October 28, 1938. When I was in school, there was a rumor that they're deporting all the Polish Jews. They're just deporting them. And we were excused, the ones that, and I remember also hearing the ones that was real German, with German-born parents, would say, "We are not Polish Jews. We have nothing to fear about it. It's not us that they mean. It's you who come from parents who came from Poland." We were brought home early that day, and they had rounded up already my father and my grandfathers, and my mother took me along to the police station to say goodbye. And from there we went. I've never seen so many people in one place. Seemed like all the Jews that I knew were surrounded at that police station, in the courtyard of the police station. And then they took them to the train station. And at the train station we said goodbye to my father, my mother's father, who we never talked about. He was a very special person in my life. And we said goodbye to my father's father, the Zaide Moshe, and I never saw him again. It was on a Friday. The whole family was there, my aunt with her 7 children. The 2 older boys were sent along to Poland. And we went home. It was Friday. And it was a very sad day. Very, very sad. I remembered at the time of one of the saddest days of my life.
Who took them? Could you describe how that
The Gestapo.
Describe what happened.
Well, I wasn't there when they rounded them up because I was in school. But when we came to the police station, it was the uniformed policemen, the Gestapo, who took them and just deported them. Because there was an incident in France that somebody got killed, and they just let it out to the Polish Jews, and they just deported every Polish Jew in Germany. Cologne and Berlin were the only ones that only took the men. All other cities took men, women, and children. And they went to Spongine. As my father got to Spongine, he right away tried to get papers for my grandfather. It was a chaos over there for my two grandfathers who to go further because the living quarters over there was just because Poland didn't let them go any further, couldn't get into Poland, and Germany wouldn't let them back.
How did you find this out?
Through mail, through the mail, through newspapers.
Tell me what kind of mail you got.
We got mail from my father telling us he's here, giving us an address where we could write to him, telling us that he sent the Seide Moshe and the other Seide, Yitzhak Isaac, into Poland, where they could get food, where they could have a room to sleep in. My father slept in an open place on straw sacks, and all the food that he got, he would mail to them. He smoked a lot, had very little food. The results paid off later.
What do you mean?
He got sick later on account of that, but we'll get to that.
How long did you receive letters from him?
He was there 9 months, and we were in communication every single day. We wrote and they wrote, and after that came Kristallnacht.
Before Kristallnacht, what other anti-Jewish...
It was only a week before, between the 28th and the...
Before we get into this, I'd just like to ask you, what other anti-Jewish measures were you subjected to?
We weren't subjected to any anti-Jewish measures. My mother protected us. She took us home after that train station. She tried to keep a normal life. She opened the store, tried to do business, but it didn't take long.
You mentioned that you would see anti-Jewish signs. Where were they posted?
On stores.
And
There was a store across the street from us, that also a furniture store, and would say, Juden verboten, Juden und Hunde verboten, Kaffeehouses, Juden und Hunde verboten, kein Eintritt für Juden, theaters. Those were the anti-Jewish signs. Stores, dress shops.
Were you allowed to go to parks?
Yes. It was still open to us.
Were you allowed to sit at public benches?
Yes. Another week, because after that we did not go out anymore because of fear.
During the time when you still were allowed to go out, do you know whether Jews were allowed to own businesses?
We had a business.
Were Jews allowed to travel freely?
As far as I was, only in the country. They weren't allowed to leave the country. They sold them tickets at a train station or a bus station or a trolley car, but we did not have a sign that we were Jews. And being that I was very blonde, blue eyes. I was never taken for a Jew.
Did you have cousins who were subjected to anti-Semitism?
Only by hearsay, they would say they can't go here, they can't go there. We kept away from it. We didn't subject ourselves to it. The store, we couldn't go in, we went into another store. Or my mother was told, if my mother was told that if by a bakery, if she sends me in, she could get the bread. Because like I say, I passed as a shikse.
Were Jews were not allowed to purchase things in certain stores?
No. And they weren't allowed to sell them.
Do you remember feeling special because you could pass as a non-Jew?
No. I just wanted to be returned already. I did not enjoy that freedom of going. I wanted to be back into my safety net.
Do you remember any conversations you had with friends?
No. Only about playing. What was ahead of us, we did not talk about. I was 9 years old when all this happened. What does a 9-year-old think about?
Did you listen to the radio at this time?
I didn't. No. But I remember the radio.
What do you remember about the radio?
Marching, anti-Semitism, the propaganda, speeches, screaming of Hitler's voice over the radio. If I didn't hear it in our apartment, I heard it in the next one.
What kinds of things were being said?
We got to have a free country. We got to have a Judenrein. We got to get rid of the enemy.
Do you remember children marching?
Yes.
Could you describe that?
Yes. This used to be the Hitler Jugend. They were quite young, and I remember them marching. The marching was that put fear into you to the last bone. The fear of marching, the regimentation of marching, the songs of marching. Yes, and you couldn't cross the street at the time of marching. I know we were always grabbed inside when marching was going on.
Could you describe what it looked like?
You see 10, 12 people abreast, marching in the hundreds, all at the same movement. Each foot came the same. Each one came down the street the same. It put fear into you.
What were they saying? Were they saying anything as they
No,
marched?
no. Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. That's
Did they carry any banners?
yes. They carried the Hakenkreuz. Oh yes, they carried banners as life, big as life.
How long were these marches?
I don't know because we could never stay out as long as they were going on. Because like I say, as soon as we found out there was marching, we were taken inside, diverted, and not hear it. My mother kept us busy, and so we didn't hear it.
Did you watch any television at this
There
time?
was no television at the time. I saw my first television in 1950.
Did you go to the movies?
Not then anymore. When I was little, they would take me to the movies. I saw Shirley Temple, all of Shirley Temple movies.
Before the movies, did they show newsreels?
Yes, they did. Again, the same thing, the propaganda, the marching.
Do you remember what was said in
No,
it?
no. It didn't mean anything to me. All I wanted to see Shirley Temple with her beautiful hair and her beautiful dresses, and that's all. That was the excitement about it.
When were you told you couldn't go to the movies anymore?
I wasn't told. We just weren't taken anymore.
When did that happen?
In the late 38.
Can you tell me any memories of what you heard on the radio?
No, I shut those out.
Do you remember any conversations that happened at home during radio listening time?
The rishis is growing, the anti-Semitism is growing, and who knows where it's going to end. And it wasn't for our ears, I just heard it. It was growing. We saw a lot of refugees coming from Vienna because that was after the Anschluss, and there were refugees coming. Those were some of the guests that were in our house for Shabbat. And they went to Holland and Belgium. My aunt Tauber had a big open house. Everybody that came, she would give a bed to sleep, food to eat, see to it they should get a smuggler to get them over the border, either Holland or Belgium.
Do you remember any of the conversations that these guests would talk?
Same conversation. How can we get out? It was very bad in Vienna. We have to get out. People that I later on met, and they told me, oh, we passed through Köln. You come from Köln? Oh, yeah, we passed through Köln. There was one lady that was a tzedekiste, which means she was a saint, and she would give us shelter. And I said, what was her name? And they said to me, Tolbe Thorn. I said, that was my aunt. I heard from many people afterwards. Even as late as 2 years ago, somebody came into my business and told me where she came from and where do you come from and so on.
When you moved from the suburbs into the city, describe how your home changed from the 6-room house to what was your home like.
Have you ever been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington?
Tell me about it.
In the Holocaust Museum in Washington, you see that house, Danny's house, an opulent house in Frankfurt, with the crystal and the chandeliers and the Hanukkah menorah at the beginning. And then you see the degradation from a not so nice house to less nice quarters. It's a come down. It was a come down. The street wasn't nice. The building wasn't nice. We were very congested with people there. I didn't have that big open avenue that we lived for before. That I could march down 20 abreast the street, where all traffic was stopped for the marching. Here it was just a quiet street, in a quiet corner, like a ghetto type.
How big was your apartment?
4 rooms,
And how many people lived in the 4 rooms?
4 people.
Was that usual for people to?
Yeah. If you could afford more, you had more. If you couldn't afford more, you didn't.
Who were your neighbors?
In that building were a lot of Gentile people, a lot of them. Those were our neighbors. There were some Jewish families nearby. The store was in the same building, the business. But downstairs, upstairs were apartments.
Do you remember the address?
Yes, Kummerbüschel. That was the name of the street.
Do you remember the address of the previous home?
Yes, Fenloschstraße.
How long did you stay in Krummerbuschel?
We came there when I was about 3 years.
And what were the circumstances that permitted you to leave?
Left Germany.
To leave Krummerbuschel?
Kristallnacht.
Please tell me.
Kristallnacht came. We woke up by a thundering of noises. And since we had that antique and furniture store, they went right through the window, broke the windows, came in with axes, and broke everything inside. Then we heard the black boots coming up the stairs, coming into the apartment, and I remember my mother had a break front that was from wall to wall, where she had everything in it, from silver to crystal, from Meissen to all these things, Limoges, which she had from the day that she got married. And one SS or one Gestapo, whatever it was, went to one side of the break front, and the other one went to the other side, and simultaneously they just threw it down. And there wasn't a piece left. The apartment was kaput, not livable. And we went from there. We could not live there anymore. And we went to my grandmother's one-bedroom apartment, and she took us in.
Did you observe them breaking this break
I
front?
just heard them break the break front
Where were you?
in the next room.
Who was with you?
My mother.
And where was your brother?
Right with us.
What did you do?
Nothing. We were stunned. Shock. You see something in slow motion happening. My father had a motorcycle. Somebody stole it. My mother got it back later on. She found out who stole it. And they said that I only took it for safekeeping. Well, she got it back. She was very strong. She got it back. She wanted something. She got it back. She says, if you're not going to give it back, I'm just going to call the police. She said, she thought still that she had power to do something. Well, they got scared. And she said, you're going to be arrested for stolen goods. Because she had somebody that came and bought it, but this man wouldn't go into that store to get it. So she walked out with it.
I'm sorry, explain
She
that.
went, there was a store across the street that took the motorcycle in. And she wanted to gather as much money as she could, because she knew that she wasn't going to earn any more money. So she had somebody that came to buy the motorcycle, but he wasn't going to go in and get it. So she walked in there and demanded to have the motorcycle back, and they just gave it to her. She said, I know you have it. And they said, yeah, I wanted to have it. I kept it for you. And the people when we left the building, the other people came. One took the radio, one took this, one took that. Was free for all.
Was your father still in Poland at this point?
Yes, sure. My father was there 9 months. This was only 2 weeks later.
And what did your mother do afterwards?
Afterwards, we went to live with my grandmother, and my mother wrote to her brother in Amsterdam, Holland. She has to get the children out of here. She has to get the children out of here. He should give a way to get them out. We had already our passports. So one day.
Had you had your passport?
Yeah.
When do you remember getting them?
No.
You don't remember
No,
getting your pictures
no,
taken?
no, no. One day a couple came from Holland, a Dutch couple, and on December 30th, they took us to the train station, and we left by train to Amsterdam, just with the passport, no visa. We were told, also before we boarded the train, there was a picture as big as life of Hitler. And my brother ran over to that picture and he started making faces, stuck his tongue out and started making faces. You're the bad one. You're the one that's doing all this to us. My mother grabbed him by the hand. The station was full of the SS and the Nazis and because it was a holiday week. It was December 30th. And everybody was going on Urlaub or on vacation or going someplace. We picked that time so that they should be busy. And we went on. She grabbed him and put him on the train so fast. Would anybody have seen him, they would have shot us on the spot.
Had you observed anybody being shot at that point?
No, no. We only heard it. We only heard of people being sent away to Dachau, and a little box of ashes came back.
Where did you hear that?
We heard it in school. We heard it from friends. We heard it. This one was sent away, never came back. A box of ashes came back to the family.
At that point, were you still allowed to go to school?
When I heard that, yes, I was allowed to go to school until Kristallnacht.
And after Kristallnacht, how were you told you weren't allowed to go to school?
They closed up the school. They closed up the school. They took the school over. It was a beautiful building, and they just took it over.
Could you describe what your block looked like after Kristallnacht?
I only saw it once or twice afterwards because it was blocked up with, they put, these metal things on, and they boarded up the windows with wood.
I don't understand when you say metal things.
Well, people that had metal things that you could roll down, everything was rolled down. Gates, metal gates. And the ones that didn't have an open store like ours, who had only beautiful windows so that you could see through in at all hours, and the windows were smashed, were boarded up with wood. Everything was boarded up. And I didn't go back much there. There was no reason to go back. We were kept indoors. Happened that my grandmother lived in the same building like my aunt Taube. And so we played there. We had the children together, and there were people coming who tried to come from Vienna, and there was always a tumult there, which is okay for children. She had a backyard, and we were out, and like I say, on December 31st, 30th or 31st, we went to Holland, and we were told at the border to be very quiet and make believe we belong to the couple, the Dutch couple. When they come for check the passports, we should make believe we're sleeping. They won't bother children. And that's how it was. We went through the border just like this, and went to Holland, and there we were greeted by my mother's brother, Usha.
We're gonna have to change
Okay.
tapes. This is tape 3 on January 22nd, 1998 with Mrs. Regina Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, could you describe the trip? How did you go to the train station? Who brought you?
My mother. My mother took us to the train station. We said goodbye to everybody beforehand, but they were so obviously Jewish, the others. You couldn't spot them. You couldn't spot us. We were dressed modern. Uh, my mother wore a chic hat, a chic coat, so she couldn't be so spotted. My grandmother would be spotted immediately because she was wearing, although my mother was wearing a sheitel at the same time too, but my grandmother would have been spotted. So she stayed behind, and we said our goodbyes, and we went to the train station.
Just want to stop. Your mother wore a sheitel
From the day she got married. You seem shocked.
No, she continued to wear this.
Yes.
And it was accepted
By who?
by the Germans.
There was nobody to stop her. I mean, nobody told them how to dress. It wasn't that bad yet. Everybody dressed the way they wanted to. And she wasn't spotted as being Jewish. Like I say, she wore a hat over her sheitel, which was always very in style, very chic.
Was it common for Germans to wear hats?
Yes, you never walked out of your house without a hat and gloves.
That was common practice.
Right.
That common practice
Yes,
in Germany
yes,
at that point
yes.
for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
We went to the train station. My mother put us on the train. Never forget the tears in her eyes when she said goodbye. She put my brother's hand into mine, and she said to me, Regina, you're his older sister. You take care of him. You're his mother now. I was 9, he was 4. And he was a rough child. Wild, unimaginably wild. He was rough. I couldn't make him sit down. I couldn't stake him up. Finally, I said to him, now it's time to sit and to be quiet and make believe you're sleeping. He was always a good actor, and he acted like he was sleeping. And we passed through the border. We sat in our chairs without moving our eyelids. We just sat there for the duration of the trip. I don't know how long the trip took. And we arrived in Amsterdam. We got off the train. Nobody stopped us. No passport control there. And we went into the arms of my Uncle Lucia.
I'd like to just go back to before the trip. Did your mother give you any instructions about your Jewish identity?
Oh, she says, always remember who you are and where you came from.
Did she give you any instructions about what to say during the trip in case someone asked you were Jewish?
No. She said to keep quiet and let the others talk for me. I also knew I was wearing a coat that had buttons on it, and I knew the buttons were filled with gold. My mother gave us along enough money so that we should have it. She told us also if we ever wanted to send her a letter and something wasn't right, we should send the letter how we should send it by return mail if we don't want to pay, if we don't have a stamp to pay for it. She told us to write every day. She told us to listen to my uncle. He means the best for us.
Just clarify what you said about paying. I don't understand.
If you don't have a stamp, you send the letter and it's going to be collected on the other side.
And you're allowed to do that in Europe?
Yeah. Okay. Like reverse, collect. She told us exactly what to do about it and to listen to my uncle, to eat kosher all the time. And that's about it.
I have one question about Germany still. At that point, did Jews have to wear a star?
Not yet, no. Not in Cologne. It may have come later, but not yet. We did not have to wear a star.
When you arrived in Amsterdam, please tell me what happened.
We were met by my uncle, who took us to his apartment. And since we weren't registered yet at any place, we were illegals, we were kept inside until my uncle went. There was a committee set up for refugees who helped German Jews and would register them. And it took a nice few weeks for him to be able to register us. He kept us inside during that time. We couldn't go to school. We didn't go anywhere. It was winter time, so it really didn't bother us too much. And a few weeks later, we were registered, and then I was able to go to school. In the meantime, my uncle tried to teach us Dutch. He spoke to us in Dutch. He read with us every day. He made me read. He made the timetable with me. And I was put back into the third grade. Second language, second time into the third grade. We were there in Holland for 3 months, till one day my uncle came to school, like he came to pick me up every day, and he had a big smile on his face. And he said, I have a big surprise for you when you come home. I couldn't wait. I rushed, I was ahead of him. I wanted to know what is all this big surprise. I came into the house, and my mother was sitting there. My father urged her constantly in every letter, don't save anything, go to the children, go join the children, go join the children. So she got a smuggler, and she walked all night to get to Holland, through the woods, through with an autobus here, with a car there. She just walked all night, practically on foot, until she got to Amsterdam. I remember her sitting because her feet were so swollen that she could not walk. I hugged her, I kissed her, I made her promise me never to leave me alone again. My brother was not so happy to see her, because he got so adjusted to life. She's here, she's not here, she's not here. And she started to cook for us again. We started eating with her. And she was registered at the committee. And life took a normal thing for us. We were adaptable. We had a room. And in the meantime, my father got in Spongine papers to get to Germany to liquidate his business. So he got papers for my grandfather, her father, my mother's father, who had a business there too. So they got papers for himself. They came to Germany. There was nothing to liquidate. Kristallnacht had liquidated it. He got a 24-hour pass. Meantime, he arranged to come to get out of Germany. He wasn't going to go back to Poland. He couldn't come to Holland. The borders were too patrolled, even to smuggle. But the borders to Belgium were still, he could go. And we got the next letter we got from him. My grandfather and him and my grandmother arrived in Antwerp. Also, they walked, they drove, and they arrived to Antwerp. Meantime, my tante Taube and her family went also to Antwerp. Now it was our turn. My father kept saying, see to it that you should come. See to it, get the smuggler, get this, get that. He even tried to send me a passport in which my mother looked very much like the woman, but she had 2 boys. So they decided they were going to cut my hair and make me look like a boy, which was devastating for me. My haircut looked like a boy. But she was lucky, and she went to the committee. The committee tried to talk her out. She said, Mrs. Pinter, the situation in Antwerp is very bad. You have so much better situation. You have a nice apartment. You have enough money here. And it's warmer here. In Antwerp, it's very bad for refugees. But she was determined to be reunited. And she says, no, I want to be together with my husband, with my parents. I want to go. Which was our luck, because after Hitler invaded Holland and Belgium, very few people were able to escape Holland. There was no way out. The water, that was all the place left to go. We went to Belgium. We took a smuggler and we walked.
Do you know how you got a smuggler?
The committee arranged it for us.
Do you remember the name of the committee?
No. It was refugee committee, which was from America, which was from the world, It's like a joint. Like the joint. They arranged it for us. And we were driven till the border town, and from there on, we walked. We walked through the cemetery. The smuggler ahead of us, my mother and I, and my brother behind us. My brother had a bad cough, I remember, and she took a big scarf and she tried to muffle out his cough so that in case somebody is nearby, should not hear us. We walked and all of a sudden we heard footsteps. The smuggler disappeared. We were left alone on the cemetery, just my mother, my brother, and I. We didn't know where to turn. We just stopped. A few minutes later, the smuggler returned. It was the footsteps of a cow. He got scared. He thought it was footsteps searching through the woods. I remember coming, then we passed by a house, a building, which was a Wirtschaft, like a bar or something, where the border guards crossed they changed the guards there. And they were all inside singing and drinking and talking. And as they were crossing, the time was when they crossed when they had the change of the guards, that's when we crossed the border. We were met by a car in the woods, a dark car. We were met by a car, and that smuggler went back to Holland, and the other one drove us to Antwerp. When we arrived to Antwerp, we went first straight to my grandmother's apartment, my grandmother and grandfather's apartment. There was nobody there. And we know that my grandmother and my grandfather are very friendly with my Tante Taube. So we figured maybe she's there. And we had the driver take us there. In my life, I cannot explain to you. They didn't know that we were coming. They had no idea that we were coming. You cannot imagine the screaming that went on when we came. And they screamed. My father was there, my grandparents were there, my aunt, her children. The screaming that came from all sides. Tante Hella, Rivke, and Hersch are here. It was a jubilation. It was like unbelievable. We fell out of the sky. And that's how we were reunited with my father.
Could you tell me your grandparents' names?
My grandmother's name was Devorah Ziesel, and my grandfather's name was Yitzhak Isaac.
And how long did you stay in Antwerp?
Until the war broke out in May 1941. It was a very tough situation in Antwerp. Antwerp, it was the coldest, wettest winter that you can imagine. We did not have a proper apartment. We didn't have where to wash the laundry. I remember my father and my mother schlepping water from outside to wash the laundry. We had to boil the laundry. The two of them were working at it. Food was scarce. We children had enough to eat. All my father did was gave us all the food he had, and he smoked. And I remember when we had just so much, and Antwerp was bad. Antwerp was very bad. And then, to make matters worse, my brother developed bronchitis, into whooping cough, into pneumonia. And whooping cough was a very contagious disease, had to be reported to the police, and they took him away into a hospital. I remember every day the miles my parents walked. There was no public transportation to get to the hospital. The miles my parents walked every day to visit him, to bring him some food. They were standing from the outside looking in, seeing him getting better, getting worse, getting better. He was there almost 6 weeks. Then he was released. And then, because he had such a bad cough and everything, they said they're going to send him in May to a summer camp to recuperate, where they send children to. They sent him to a camp to recuperate. War broke out. One day I woke up and I saw my father and my mother standing by the window, whispering. I thought it was thunder. And my father whispered to my mother and said, "We are being invaded." And shortly afterward, the sirens came and we had to get into the air raid shelter. This was May 10th, 1941. We came out of the air raid shelter. My mother said, "I'm going to get Hersh. Whatever happens, I want us to be together." She said to my father, "You take care of Rivke. I'm going to get Hersh." My father came back from shul and he heard rumors that they're taking the children to the French border for safety. My mother says, "I have to convince myself of that. I'm going." She set out to go by foot, by train, by hitchhiking. A farmer gave her a lift. A car gave her a lift. A few miles here, a few miles there. She came to the camp, and the children were abandoned. The counselors had left, and the children were abandoned. She took my brother, and she found another child that lived on the same street like we. And back she started out with these two children. She started out with these two children. That was Friday morning. She arrived pretty late, walking, again with a farmer, again with a boss, again with a car. She came back with the children. She even brought a child for a neighbor. The weekend was sirens here, sirens there, bombing. What do we do now? Where do we go? What do we do? Monday morning, my Tante Taube sent Ellie over to the house and said, "Pack a few bags. We just heard that the France opened up its borders and we're going all to France. And just come." My mother ran over to her parents' house. Tell them, "Let's meet at the train station at a certain hour and we're all going to France. We're all going to be together." We got to the train station. We got as far from Antwerp to Brussels. It was also that my aunt had more money than we, and we figured, she says, "We'll pay for the fares. Don't worry about it. We'll go." And we got as far as Antwerp and we had to change trains. We got into the next train, and as my father, my mother, brother, and I went into the train, as the others started to board the train just closed the doors. We were in the train, they were on the station. They screamed through the window and said, "Get off at the next stop. We'll meet you at the next stop. Stay at the next stop. Wait for the train from here." We got to the next stop, which was Genf, city named Genf. Shortly afterwards, sirens came, a bombardment. We had to go into the shelter. We lost our entire luggage that same day. We couldn't even take nothing. We were rushed into the shelter. And when all clear came, the train station was totally devastated. I mean, it was totally destroyed. What happened was that France had sent the army over from France to Belgium to help, and there was somebody, a spy, who notified the Germans that there's help here. So that's when they bombarded the train station. We got out onto the street because we couldn't go anyplace. We started walking. You follow a crowd. You walk, you walk. We had nothing with us, nada. We walked, and all of a sudden my brother stopped, and he says, I can't go any further. My father saw a mezuzah on the door, and he knocked on the door. It happened to be, it was the rabbi's house. He had a shul. Reluctantly, they let us in, and they gave us something to drink, some hard-boiled eggs, something, nothing great. They let us sleep on the benches of the shul. They were not nice to us. Next day, they told us we have to leave because it may be dangerous for them to give shelter to refugees. So again, we started out. Where do we go from here? We got to go in the direction of France. Father started back to a train station, back to the direction. We took a train. The next train stopped in Lille, which was already France. Again, we walked out of the train station where every hotel was closed. We couldn't go any place. So again, we stopped at a house and said maybe you could let us stay the night. It happened that it was the house of a galach, a Catholic priest. They let us in. They gave us to drink. They tried to make us hard-boiled eggs. They wanted to give us food. They were so nice to us that it was unbelievable. They gave us fruits. They knew we weren't going to eat. Also, one thing, during that whole trip, during that whole thing, we never ate trefe. We stayed there the night, and the next day they said we have to leave because they will leave also. It's no sense staying behind. We got to Paris. In Paris, we were able to find here again, my father had not had his talus and twill. Every morning, wherever we went, he tried to find somebody that would lend him his talus and twill. He went to a shul, put on every day his talus and twill. We got to Paris, and we went to a hotel. My father set out in the morning. He says, I'm going to look for some food. I'm going to look for a shul. I'll be back. I hear where we could go next. As my father had left, two French policemen came to our room, and they asked where my father was. And we said that he's not here. He'll be back soon. Because they were picking up men off the streets, any place they could, to take them into the army. My mother, the French government. My mother said to us very quietly, we're going to go down to the lobby, walk out like if we're coming back. We left again everything behind. We're going to walk out the lobby like we're going to come back in 10 minutes. And as we walked out, we saw the two gendarmes waiting for my father, but they didn't notice us. We walked out of the hotel, and down the street we saw my father coming, and my mother kept walking and whispered to him, turn around and follow us. Then when we were out of eyesight, she told him what had happened, and she says, we can't go back to the hotel. They're going to take you into the army. And my father became a little desperate. He says, if I volunteer to the army, then they're going to take care of you and the children. My mother says, no way. She says, you don't want to come with us? Give me my passports, and I will continue with the children. Well, he wasn't going to do that. So we went back to the train station and got tickets to go to Bordeaux, further into France. We got to Bordeaux, which was in chaos. We didn't have where to stay. There were a lot of Jewish people on the trains, off the trains. We followed the group, we followed the crowd. We got into an abandoned building where there was a lot of straw laying there. By that time, my father says he has to look for work because we're running out of money. So he heard in shul again every morning looking for a place to put on his tallis and film. And where did he get the news? He doesn't know how to read French. So he got the news in shul. What was going on? So he got a job unloading docks. The dock, unloading ships. They paid very well, didn't ask for papers, and he unloaded a few days, and he hurt his back. That was the end of his unloading career. Now, where do we go? There are consulates that sell visas, that make visas, that give visas. We have to get out of France because they're coming in. As we went, we left Lille, the Germans invaded Lille. We left Paris, a day or two later, they invaded Paris. And they kept on coming. As we went, my father went to every consulate, tried to buy every visa that he could possibly get. But we need a transit visa. How do we get a transit visa? We have to get out of France into Spain and Portugal, where there's boats. The visas were no good. We knew it, but we wanted to get out. He got into a consulate to get the transit, and he sees a man who he didn't even know. He walks over to him and he says, Shalom Aleichem, wie heißt ihr? What's your name? And he says, I'm Rav Krieger, Rabbi Krieger. And he picked up a conversation with him, and as he sees the rabbi walking in to get his... By that time we had picked up a lot of people who were with us and who depended on my father to get them the visas. And as he was going in, my father handed him a handful of passports and says, when you'll get yours, have them stamped too. And that's how we got our... The lines were from here to eternity. Unbelievably long, the lines were to get a visa. That's how we got the visa out to leave Bordeaux. And we went on the train, and we went through Spain and Portugal. And we arrived in Lisbon with Rabbi Krieger together. And again in Portugal, the joint, must have been the American joint, had sent out a committee, and they took us off the trains. They gave us hotel rooms, gave us food. There was a room full there that gave us change of clothes. We came with no changes, no nothing. And it was a warmer country. We came with warm clothes. We needed lighter clothes. We were there in Portugal for quite a while. Again, Portugal was a neutral city. Lisbon was a neutral city. We saw the Germans marching in and out.
Okay, we're going to change tapes.
So ready?
This is tape 4 on January 22nd, 1998, with Mrs. Regina Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, I'd just like to clarify something. For the times that you were in Holland and in Belgium, what was the situation for Jews like there?
As long as the Germans did not come in, the situation was well. But I want to also make clear one thing. In France, we did not have to wear a yellow armband, but we were very noticeable Jews, because only Jews were without the masks. Every other person was having a mask in case they were going to a gas mask, in case Hitler was going to throw gas. Every person had a gas mask except Jews. So we were known that we were not Jews, but we were not hurt in any way.
Were the French people nice to you?
We never had any dealings with them. We never have came together with them. We just had went from train station to train station, from this place to that place. And in France, my mother had to take a shuttle off because it was infected. We all got lice there, sleeping on straw, and she had to take her shuttle off then.
In what places were you required to wear a yellow armband?
Never, never. We were always one step ahead of it. Once we were in Portugal, we were among the refugees of Portugal. We did not have an identification card. We were just refugees. We were refugees from all over. You cannot imagine the refugees, the influx of refugees that came to Lisbon. But in Lisbon, we had it good. We had food. There was plenty food. My mother took a room again and started cooking. And again, we bought some pots and pans. Started cooking on cookware, the stone cookware. And there was no gas, so we had it's called a primus. It's a one heater which has to be fed with gasoline, put in a match, and has to be pumped up. And that's how she cooked. And we were very well taken care of. My father went to shul every day, and he wrote immediately to his cousin in America, David Cohn, that he is without a talus and tefillin. And by airmail, he sent him a talus and tefillin. Talus and tefillin and tzitzis.
Where did your father have enough money to sustain you?
He didn't. He didn't. By that time, we were almost run out because the gold coins that I carried were going one by one for tickets. There was also a time that we did not have enough money, special crossing from France to Portugal. We did not have enough tickets. And since we were a whole group together and that saw my father as the leader of the group, my father bought just tickets for them, maybe 2 tickets for us. As we boarded the train, he took along 2 people to bring the luggage on the train and left one there. Came out with 3. And again, he took the luggage, took 2 people along and left another one there. Came out with another one. So by the time everybody got on the train, they had more tickets than they had people. He had to outmaneuver these things. And once we got to Portugal, like I say, there was a committee set up to help people. They gave us enough money to live on, to pay our rent, to have food. Then we got money from my cousins, David Cohn, and my mother had a brother in America. His name was Sam Ressler, and he immediately sent money, tried to find out what he could do for us. But there was nothing he could do for us because the Polish quota was closed. We went to the consulate, we registered again the same answer, can't come to America, the Polish quota is closed. My father tried to, since my brother and I were born in Germany, to send us on a quota. We should go by ourselves. No way. We were minors and we had to stay with the Polish quota. Now, where do we go here? We are only on a transit. Any time could come that we should be sent back. So we went from place to look where could we go. Finally, my father saw a notice in the committee looking for farmers to go to Santo Domingo. Where is Santo Domingo? He talked to my mother, told her that. He went and got a map and looked on the map. Where is Santo Domingo? He showed her, here's America, He said, it's not so far away from America. She says, it's only a few days away from America. So they decided we're going to go to Santo Domingo. We're going to register. 2 young people, my parents were in their 30s, with 2 small children. They're going to become farmers. And they accepted us. We signed up for life to go become farmers. To go to Santo Domingo, we had to pass America. The journey from Lisbon to America was 12 days. We got here on a Friday and the boat had left already. Only on Friday did the boat go to Santo Domingo. Boat had left already and we were able to stay a whole week in Ellis Island, were visited by the cousins, by David and Moshe Cohn, and my uncle Sam came to visit us every single day. They brought us food and chocolate and all the goodies and clothes and everything. They tried to make papers for us to stay. It was just before Pesach. They wanted us to stay at least over Pesach here. No way. We had to go to Santo Domingo. And the first night of Pesach was on the boat. They gave us food. They gave us matzah. They gave us wine. They gave us whatever it is. And we left. I remember my mother crying. My father made the first Seder on the boat. And only I and he were sitting by the Seder. We had the wine. We had the matzah. Charein we didn't need. We had plenty of that. It was so bitter feeling to leave. And we sustained ourselves with raw eggs because we wouldn't eat anything. So they gave us fresh fruits and they gave us raw eggs. I remember my father puncturing a hole, one on the top, one on the bottom, washed the egg, and he made us suck out the egg. And that's how we lived on the boat for 5 days. We arrived in Santo Domingo. Before that, we got 1 day stop in Puerto Rico. And that was the first time I saw a colored person unloading the dock. And he was hardly dressed. He just wore a little pair of shorts. And I said to my mother, "Is das ein Neger?" And she had not seen it either, really, except in movies, but not in real life. And she says, "I guess that's where we're going." And all I wanted to know is, if you're going to such a schwarze country, if my mother were to have another baby, would that be a Negro too? And they assured me it wouldn't be. And we went to Santo Domingo. We arrived there in Ciudad Trujillo. And there was one man by the name of Steinmetz who was a shochet, who had kosher, and we were able to stay with him and have a meal. And he told us that there is really no Yiddishkeit in Sosua, nothing whatsoever. And but he taught one person to slaughter chickens, kosher chickens. Okay, there be chickens. We got to Sosua. It was a desert, really a desert. Cows, chickens, horses, lots of horses walking around there. We got in barracks. We were assigned 2 rooms in a barrack, community bathrooms, and a community kitchen. Okay, they had one kosher kitchen, they had one regular kitchen. Fine. They assigned my father to work in the fields. My mother was going to help in the kitchen. No school for us. My father said, "No school for children. How are we going to grow up? Be farmers without reading, without writing? How are we going to grow up?" Well, we'll see later on. Maybe they'll bring a teacher in. There, my father went this first morning into the men's room and he was introduced to the shoichet. And he sees the shoichet standing there by the mirror, shaving himself with a knife, which is strictly forbidden. You shave yourself with an electric shaver, but no knife is allowed to touch your face. And that was the end of our chicken career. No more chicken. My father wasn't going to eat from him. If he's not an observant Jew, my father wasn't going to eat. My brother was allowed to eat, but my mother, my father, and myself, we were eating only fish, vegetables. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. Once in a while, a baby boy was born, and the shochet from Mr. Steinmetz from Ciudad Trujillo was a moil, and he came to be the moil in Sosura. So he would shecht us a chicken or two, and we would have that. My father was working in the field, and that career did not last long. He developed rheumatic fever. He was put into the hospital, which was also a makeshift hospital, wasn't really a hospital. There was a doctor there and a nurse, that was all. And he was laid to rest. They had nothing else for him. He also developed malaria there. And he was there for quite a few weeks. I remember once there was no dentist in town, and I remember once having a toothache, and my mother took me. She was given permission to go to Puerto Plata, which is the nearest city, to take me to the dentist. No anesthesia, no nothing. This tooth hurts you? Out. And we lived there for 9 months, but my father was a little instigator. He wanted to organize a minyan. He wanted to organize more kosher kitchen. He wanted to organize a school for us children. And one day they decided we have to get rid of this instigator. And they were going to give us permission to go to Ciudad Trujillo and take up an apartment there and live there where he could send the children to school. After 9 months, they sent us to school in Santo Domingo. Again, back to the third grade. Now that was the fourth language, the fourth school, and the third grade again. I was sent to a Catholic school because they also taught English. It was a private school. My father did not want me to go to a regular public school because he wanted me to have a better education. And he sent me to a Catholic school. The Catholic school was named Colegio La Milagrosa, the College of the Miracles. I learned how to speak Spanish. It didn't take them long to put me into the next grade and the next. I was there for 3 years, 2 years in that school, because we were in Santo Domingo all of 3 years. And my father was put in charge. They had a factory of shoes, because he couldn't get the job. It was only what the committee made. It was an agreement that the refugees will not take away the jobs from the natives. So they made a factory of shoes, and he became the supervisor in the shoe factory. And before you knew it, he was the foreman of the factory. Unfortunately, this didn't last very long either. The fact that he was so malnutrition during the whole time, and the fact that he smoked very much, he started coughing very badly, and before long he was diagnosed with open tuberculosis. What do you do now? He got a bigger apartment. My father was put into a room by himself. My mother took care of him. She nourished him. Before long, he gained a lot of weight. But he had tuberculosis. We were not together. Everything was boiled. He was kept totally, totally separated from us. We looked through him through the window. We waved to him, talked to him through the window. He needed rest, good food. But that's no cure. The doctor said the only cure there is if they make him a pneumotora, which is putting his lungs to rest and pumping air into the lungs. My father read a lot about it. My mother read a lot about it. She was very much in favor for him to go to a sanatorium and have it done. He was not in favor of it because he was afraid it's not going to prolong his life. It's just going to mature him. But once my mother got something in her head, she said, I've got to do everything to save my husband, even argue with him. She said to him, it's very hard to take care of you. You better go to a sanatorium and where will have better care. P.S. He agreed he's going to go to a sanatorium. At the sanatorium, my mother says to the doctors, you try and make that pneumotora. My husband is not a doctor. He will not know what you're doing. You try and do it. If you're successful, you tell him that it's done. If you're not successful, we haven't lost anything. P.S. They did the pneumotora. They were successful at it. He knew. He kept on saying, you're trying to put a pneumotora into me. I said, no, we're trying just to puncture this, that. He wasn't fooled by it. But one day the doctor came in after having done it and x-rayed him and says, Mr. Pinter, congratulations. You have a successful pneumotora and your success rate for healing is 100%. We were ecstatic. But also, nobody knew, whether it was friends, neighbors, or anything, that my father had tuberculosis. Would the American consul ever get wind of this, we would never be able to come to America. So it was the darkest kept secret. Again, we kept very much to ourselves on account of that. It was the darkest secret. My mother walked every day to the hospital, which was several miles, in the tropical sun. She walked every single day to visit him. Another thing, in the hospital, she wasn't able to bring him food. My father at first refused to eat trefe. She got a hatter. She wrote to America, and she wrote to his cousins, Moshe and David Cohn, who were the most religious people, and they sent a hatter for him to eat trefe. They said it is more a sin for him not to eat and not to heal than for him to eat kosher and not get well. It was terrible when he had to eat. He threw up in the beginning. He refused to eat it. He got sick from it. He couldn't swallow it. But a human being is a human being. He got used to it. And he ate it. And he got well. And he saw that he was going to get well. His coughing subsided. He wasn't spitting up any more blood. He felt better. He was reading there. He had nobody to speak to because this was a sanatorium for native people. They called him El Rabino. And they called him El Rabino is because my father did not shave anymore. In order for him to shave, he used a certain powder. Now that powder could smell up a half a city. In the hospital, he couldn't do it. I mean, everybody would know when my father shaved. But in the hospital, he couldn't do it. So he grew a beard. And they called him El Rabino. And luck would have it, he stayed there, and a couple that we befriended, a Mr. and Mrs. Greenfeld, were going to go to Cuba. They got a visa to go to Cuba. They were also a semi-Orthodox couple, a Heimish couple. And his wife went ahead, and he didn't have where to eat for a few days. No, he didn't have where to eat because they gave up their apartment in the last few days. They ate, all of them. They ate in my mother's house. My mother cooked for them. And as they went to the airport, my mother said, I'll come along to the airport. I'll say goodbye to you. And she said goodbye to them, and she started crying. She said, where am I going to be left with my husband and my 2 children? Santo Domingo? What is there for us? Who are my children going to mingle with? My father always worried, who are my children going to get married to? And this woman took my mother's hand and says, Mrs. Pinter, I promise you, I will send you a visa to Cuba. And my mother, a visa to Cuba, how is this possible? She says, I'll send you a visa to Cuba. 6 weeks later, we got visas to Cuba. My father said to my mother, you go ahead with the children. I can't travel by plane. Because with his pneumothora, he could not go by plane because of the oxygen. He wouldn't have enough air to breathe. So my mother says, I'll get you out of here. There was another man that was a diamond cutter. Cuba was a big diamond industry during the war. And my mother said to him, I'm going to get you a job in Havana as a diamond cutter. If you promise me, you will come on a boat with my husband to Cuba. And the man says, if you get me out of here, you've got it. We got to Cuba, and my mother started working on that to get a visa for that man. She signed that he was going to work in a diamond factory X amount of time for nothing and pay off for the visa. She sent the visa over there, and this man and my father set out on a banana boat to come to Cuba. And that's how we were united in Cuba.
I don't understand how the visas were obtained in terms of money.
Oh, for money you could buy everything.
And you had money?
We didn't have money. The consulate gave that man who got us the visa took the money together and got it. Later on, we paid him back for it. And the same thing was for that man. That man went in Cuba. When I came to Cuba, I was 14 and a half years old. And I did not go to school anymore because I said, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to help my family. But we got to Cuba. My father came to Cuba. After a short while in a sanatorium there, he was dismissed. And he was fine.
I'd like to ask you one more point, just about clarification about when you were in Santo Domingo in Sosua. Was there an existing Jewish community there?
No. There was nobody there. Only the refugees, 800 refugees came from Europe, which Trujillo allowed to come in. Trujillo wanted to clean his slate with Roosevelt because at one time there was a boat that went from Santo Domingo, came to Santo Domingo from Haiti, and Santo Domingo didn't let it in, and they couldn't go back. And everybody on the boat perished. And naturally, Roosevelt banned Trujillo. So when the war came, Trujillo saw an opportunity to clear his slate with America, and he opened its door to refugees.
When you say Roosevelt banned it, I'm not clear what you mean.
Roosevelt was very angry that he allowed a boat with people to sink.
Do you recall the name of this boat?
No, that's before my time.
Do you know if the community still exists in Santo Domingo?
I went back there. There is a small community still in existence, but they got mixed up with the native people. They got married, they intermarried. After the war, everybody that had hand and feet cleared out. They went back to Santo Domingo. They came to America. Everybody, it was cleared out. And once we were in Cuba, my father started working at home. He took in a machine to work, a diamond machine, so he could do at his leisure. I learned how to do diamond cutting, so did my mother. And we were diamond cutting. In fact, I have a picture that I will show you as a diamond cutter. And we lived there for 2 years. And things were comfortable there. We had everything, kashrus, a shul. My father went to shul, which was one of the most important things to him. And we lived there until the war was over, and then we came to America.
What were you doing when you found out the war was over?
What was I doing? I was in the factory cutting diamonds.
Were you aware of what was happening in Europe?
We were aware, yes, we were aware, because we did get papers. There were old papers, there were years later, months later, we got the forwards that was sent to us from America. We got papers and we got everything. Yeah.
And what did you hear at that time?
At one time we heard that a bomb fell on Hiroshima, and to describe the bomb was very, very, very difficult. How can you imagine one bomb killing that many people? It was unimaginable. And then later on we heard that the war was over and became an exit back to the American consul. Years have passed. And like I said once before, we came to America because the bed I slept with, finish? The bed I slept with every night from the time I was 9 years old until I was 17. I came to America and I got my bed, never belonged to me. My lost youth. Once we came here, we came with a lot of pride. We never wanted to see a committee again. We never wanted to see any place that would give us anything. We came with expectation. We came with wanting to live on our own. We wanted to make it on our own. The rest is history.
We're going to change tapes again.
Okay, I'll be out.
This is tape 5 on January 22nd, 1998, with Mrs. Regina Weiss. Mrs. Weiss, before we continue with your journey, I'd like to go back to the time that you were in Belgium. Were there any air raids the time that you were there?
There were many air raids that we went in, but none was as bad as the one in Genf, where it was such a bad air raid that there was a lot of dust, and we thought that it was a gas bomb had come down, and we had no gas masks, and my father sat widow with us.
Could you explain what widow is?
Widow is the last prayer that you say before you die. And although people say it often, say it when they get sick, men say it every day, but for him to make my mother and us repeat after him every word of it. So in case something happens, we have said our widow.
How many times did you have to say widow during the war?
2 or 3 times, but not mostly. It was the most noticeable one that he made us say it. Other times I heard him say it, him himself say it. Many times I heard my mother say to him, "Zug widow," but that time he made us repeat every word.
Could you say that now?
Could I repeat widow? No. But my husband will repeat it to you. He knows it by heart.
Could you describe the other times that you were asked to say this?
I'm not never really asked to say this. I heard him say it.
Could you describe those times?
Fear, not being able to. I mean, I remember in that particular time, I remember we were laying in the train station, and we tried to go in the lower ground. There was no air raid shelter per se. We went to the lower ground, and we were all against the wall, and we were laying on the floor, and my parents were laying over us, like sheltering us. And I was laying there with my father and my mother with my brother. I heard my father, my mother whisper, says widow. And he said every word of it, and he made me repeat it. And she said it with him, and I repeated every word.
And what train station was this again?
Genf.
Could you describe the other circumstances where?
The first time we went into a shelter, where we heard bombs, which was in Antwerp. That was that first night when Antwerp was invaded. Was also but it wasn't so fearful because we went down and we waited for the siren to clear up, and then we went back upstairs to our apartment, and next door apartments fell down, and where there was nothing left there. We were happy that ours was still standing, but it was not, for children this wasn't so, you adapt to these things.
Do you remember who was in charge at that point?
Charge of what?
Of Antwerp.
No.
And
Belgium was taken properly without any resistance. And so was Holland, for sure. France tried to resist a little. And we saw French, the army, we saw soldiers, we saw guns, we saw, again in France, the situation was bad in France. We saw them aggressive, we saw that it was coming closer.
Describe to me what you saw.
Abandoned buildings, bombed out buildings, people who had no place to go, who had one place one day and didn't have the place the next day. People were running. It was a chaos. It's that you couldn't pass the street. Everything was running to consulates. Consulate was the main point where people went to. Where could we find a visa? How can we get out? Where could we go? Also, we found somebody there that knew where my grandparents were. Being that we never were united with them on the train, we found that they took the later train, which because our the train station was bombed, theirs went straight to France without stopping any place. Theirs went straight to Luchon. In Luchon, they were only crying, where is my daughter, where is my son-in-law, where are my children, will I ever see them again, what happened to them? And we met somebody on the way who knew that they were there, and they gave us an address where we could write to them. And from then on we were in touch for many years. We would send them money. I don't know if it arrived. We would send them from Portugal food packages. I don't know if they got them. We sent through the Red Cross. They were in unoccupied France. But our luck was that we were separated and we survived. And they, with the money, couldn't make it.
When did you learn of their fate?
After the war. Because my uncle and 3 children were separated from them during the running, and they went into Switzerland.
Which uncle was this?
Uncle Avrom, my Tante Tobe's husband. And 4 children. 4 children.
Their names?
It was Ellie, Meilach, Reisel, and Tobe. And not Tobe, and Freide.
And their last names are Pinto?
Thorn.
I'm sorry.
Thorn.
tell me when you learned what happened.
Oh, it was such a happiness. We were sitting someplace by a consulate and somebody questioned my father, Shalom Aleichem, wie heißt dir, what's your name, where do you come from? And so he says, and he told him the story, how he got separated from his sister and brother-in-law, from his father-in-law and mother-in-law. He says, oh, they arrived in Lushon. Where in Lushon? My father started screaming, Hella, Hella. The Tate Mama lebt, sie sind in Lushon. And we wrote to them, and we had no way of going to them. And then we wrote to them. And even in Santo Domingo, we still got mail from them. But in Portugal, for 9 months, we had every week letters from them. It went through the Red Cross. We went every way that we could get to hear from them. But were doing fine. They were doing better than we were. Until occupied France was taken over. In the late 40s. I mean, in 42 or 43. Shortly before the war, they were still alive.
And when did you discover what happened to them?
After the war.
And what had happened to them, and how did you discover it?
They had a son who was with the French Foreign Legion, because again, he didn't have where to go. So he registered with the French Foreign Legion. And he was in the army. And he was on a boat. And the boat sank with all the soldiers. Except for him. But they didn't know that. And they said word to their parents. Unfortunately, their son sank for France. He got killed for France. They were sitting shiva in the camp. But because he died for the fatherland, for the country of France, they want to give them better quarters, and they took them out of that camp and put them into a much, much better camp with food, with this, that. And that camp was liquidated to the Germans. And that's how they perished. And my uncle lived until about 3 years ago. You can sometimes see fate. You go in one direction, it turns into the other direction. You don't know. You don't know. You don't know which direction to turn. You don't know You're being led. And if you're a believer, you believe that's the way it's supposed to be. Like I said, throughout all that journey, we never ate treifah. My father put on his film every single day. Whether it was his or somebody else's, he never missed a day. Till the very end, he was a very Orthodox Jew.
When did you discover what happened to European Jewry?
Right after the war. We were in Santo Domingo. We were in Cuba. And we got papers. And it was unbelievable. And then people started coming out and started telling stories. And then you saw newsreels. And you saw it on television, in the movies. We went to the movies very, very often because that was the only time you could see something. We went to see the newsreels. And we saw what happened in concentration camps. We saw what happened, and then how people started to come out and tell the story. This one had a friend here, this one had a friend there, and this one had a cousin here, this one had a cousin there. Right after the war, my father went to When we came to America in 1946 and 47, my father went to Europe to see which of the family survived, which didn't. Went to see them all. Many of them went in Belgium. Not too many.
What was your reaction to all of this?
Horrible. It's a horrible experience. It's to know that your cousins did not survive. One did and two didn't. Two did and one didn't. It's a horrible experience. But you know, human being as a human being is always happy. Well, we survived the entire family. There were very, very, very few people that father, mother, and children survived. So we were happy about that. I had my father, I had my mother, I had my brother.
How has the experience left you in terms of your identity as a Jew?
I'm a true believing Jew. I say we would not, if this would not have happened, we would not have Israel today. It had to happen. You ask sometimes questions why, but you're not allowed to ask the questions. We teach our children to accept fate, not to ask questions. As a believing Jews, you cannot ask questions. That's what God meant for us to happen. That's what happened.
What do you think your life would have been like if it hadn't have been for the war?
If it hadn't been for the war, it would have been a nice, normal life. I still would have married my husband because the family knew each other. And it wasn't that I married out of left field. It would have been a continuity of life. You always think that life is going to stay this way and it's going to be continued this way. If the good is good, you hope it's going to be good. It's going to continue this way.
How has the war affected the ways you've brought up your children?
I didn't let my children be affected by it. It's enough that I was affected. I never walk out without money. I always have money with me. Because you never know. And it took me a long time to wear a pair of boots. I never wanted to spend much money on China because I remembered Kristallnacht. That's about it.
I neglected to ask you when you came to this country.
We came in July 1946.
And how did your life unfold briefly from there?
From here, we came with a lot of ambition, a lot of pride, and we never wanted to take anything from anybody again. There were people that went to Hayas, that went to joints, that went to the UJA to get money for apartments, to get money for nothing. We don't even know where a door was open. We wanted to do it on our own. My father went into business. He was always a businessman. And being that we didn't have any money, somebody says, why don't you get a job? You will have a steady income. So I remember saying, yeah, I should get a job. And he went, they gave him, somebody recommended someplace where he could go for a job. And he went up to that building, and he looked up to the third floor where that was that. I told him he's good with his hands, he should become a watchmaker. And he looked at the sign from that watchmaker factory. And he says, if I go up there, I'll remain a worker the rest of my life. Because you never want to give it up. You're afraid the next week's wages. And he turned around and he walked away. And he went into the Diamond Dealers Club. And He met a lot of people that he knew. He didn't know the language English, so but over there you need only to know Yiddish. He went into people, and people knew him. They always knew him for his honesty and his integrity. He took a stone from this one, sold it to that one, had the profit from that one, and that's how he started to be in the diamond business. He took a parcel here, parceled it out over there, collected here, paid here. He had the profit. My mother and I, we went to work. My brother went to school. I went to night school because I wasn't going to go to the third grade again in a new country, a new language. I learned how to speak English. Then I took an aptitude test from night school, and I went to high school.
What high school did you go to?
Washington Irving High School.
And what did you do after high school?
I got married. I raised a family.
How did you meet your husband?
How I met my husband? I met my husband on a very cold day. We lived in Williamsburg, and we were walking. There was a street that all the boys and girls used to walk on Shabbat afternoon. And I was walking, and it was getting cold. And I said to my friend, let's go into the Young Israel. Let's warm up a little bit. And there were 3 boys standing there. And my friend knew one of them, and she introduced me. This is Regina Pinter, this is Harry Weiss, this is Max Pollack, etc., etc. And he says, you're Regina Weiss? Regina Pinter? I said, yes. He says, your father davens by the Shabbat? You just came to America? I said, yes. And being that I did not know how to speak English very well at the time, he started talking to me in Yiddish. And we hit it off right away. But we are the same age. So our parents were not very happy about it. We were 18 and a half years old at the time. His parents for sure not. I mean, who wants to marry off a boy at 18 or 19? And that's, we waited a while, had a lot of heartaches, and got married. At the age of 21. Almost.
And how many children do you have?
I have 4 children.
Could you tell me their names?
Moshe, Devorah, Brandy, and Isaac. Who give us a lot of nachas.
And what are their ages?
Moshe is 46. Devorah is 44. Brandy is 40. And Isaac is 35.
And do you have grandchildren?
We have a nice group of grandchildren.
Can you tell me their names?
Sure. Moshe has Aaron, Ellie, Chesky, and Dina. Devorah has Chaskel, Ellie, Sorala, Batsheva, David, and Aviva. Brandy has Dovi, Yehudit, and Ari. And Isaac has the Sora, Daniela, and Elisa. No, Sora, Daniela, oh, somebody's going to kill me. Sora, Daniela, and Dina.
And I understand you also have great-grandchildren.
Yes.
And their names?
Ahuva and Shana and Leah.
Is there anything you'd like to add that I've neglected to ask you?
Not after 3 hours of taping, I don't remember anything anymore.
I'd like to thank you.
My pleasure. Now you want to see my pictures? Okay, this is my mother's father. His name was Yitzchok Isaac, and I got the picture from my Uncle Sam. In 1938, my grandfather sent this picture to America. Oh, I got that picture after the war. We enlarged it from a passport picture. It was taken in 1938. Okay, this picture is my mother's mother. Her name was Devorah Ziesel. And this picture was taken in Cologne, Germany in 1938 and was sent to America. And that's how I got the picture after the war, and I enlarged it. This is my father's mother. Her name was Rivka. The picture was taken approximately in 1920, and I got it from a cousin here in America.
What's her last name?
Rivka Pinter.
And where was it taken?
In Cologne. Okay, this is my father's father. His name was Moshe Cohn. He was my grandfather. And the picture was taken in 1938, and I got this from a little picture that my father had, and I enlarged it. In 1945. This picture was taken of myself on my first day of school in 1935. It was customary to get eine Zuckertüte. Every child got a big bag of sugar candies. It was my first day in school.
Where?
In Cologne, Germany. This is my father taken in Spongine, where he was for 9 months, and it was in early 1939 that this picture was taken, and I got the picture from a friend of his that was also in Spongine. The one with the cap is my father. Okay, this was the first family picture that we have in America at my brother's bar mitzvah in our apartment in 1947. And it was the first simcha.
Could you identify who's in the picture?
This is Dave standing there, my mother, my father, and myself. Okay, this is my parents in 1985 at the family simcha, a very happy time. It was my grandson's bar mitzvah. Okay, this is my son Moshe's picture, which was taken in 1990, in the 90s. And that is his, from left to right, it is all the son Aaron, Moshe, Chani, Eli, Chesky, and Dina.
And where was this taken?
This was taken in New York,
As was the previous one?
as was the previous one. Okay, this is Chaskel's and Simi's wedding, which was taken in 5 years ago. And the top row is Leslie, Simi, Chaskel, and Ellie, Sorala, Devora, Duvet, Aviva, and Batsheva
Or on the bottom row?
on the bottom row. Okay, this is a picture from Brandy and Tommy. From left to right is Dovi, Brandy, Tommy. Bottom row is Ari and Yehudit. It was taken, I believe, on Chaskel's wedding 5 years ago in New York. This is Isaac's family, and from top row from left to right is Lee. Oh God. Isaac and his children, and it is. I don't believe it. Hope you can wipe that out.
Right.
It is Sora, Dina, and Daniela. It was taken at a family simcha in the 90s. Let me quickly remember the names. All right, this was taken, that's the last picture taken from my mother with her great-great-grandchildren. And this is Ahuva and Shane and Ahuva, and my mother. It was taken just 4 weeks before she passed away in the country.
And what year was that?
My mother passed away in 1990, a year and a half ago, 1996. This is our great-grandchildren, and this is Ahova and Shana, and this was taken